Sophia never intended to take that route, not through the wilderness reserve, not past the ranger station where she'd first met him, and certainly not along the rural highway that held the echoes of her greatest loss. But then she spotted him, a silver-muzzled Belgian Malinois, scarred and emaciated, lying beside the guardrail. One name spoken aloud changed everything. A bond never truly broken, a betrayal years in the making, and a truce that would unravel everything she thought she knew. This is more than a reunion. It's a revelation that will test the limits of loyalty and forgiveness. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early autumn rain fell in relentless sheets across the mountain pass as Sophia Reed gripped the steering wheel of her Forestry Service truck with white knuckles. Her eyes remained fixed on the winding highway cutting through Blackridge National Forest, a place she had deliberately avoided for the past 3 years. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Her carefully plotted route back from the Wildlife Conservation Conference should have taken her along the interstate, safe, impersonal, far from the memories that still had the power to steal her breath without warning. But a massive pile-up near the state line had forced a detour, and now here she was, driving through the heart of her past with nothing but the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers and the low hum of the radio for company. 3 years. It seemed both a lifetime and merely moments since she had last traveled this road, since she had packed her belongings into this very truck and driven away from Blackridge Ranger Station without looking back, leaving behind 8 years of service, countless wilderness rescues, and a partnership that had defined her career as a canine handler with the Forest Service. "Just get through it," Sophia muttered to herself, adjusting the heater as a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature settled between her shoulders. 2 hours and you're clear. 2 hours and it's behind you again. The rain intensified as she rounded a sharp curve, the headlights cutting through sheets of water to illuminate the lonely stretch of Highway 23. The mountainside rose steeply to her left, while a sharp drop-off to her right was partially guarded by metal barriers, a treacherous stretch even in good weather. She slowed the truck, leaning forward slightly as visibility decreased. That's when she saw it, a dark shape on the narrow shoulder ahead, too large for fallen debris, too still to be wildlife seeking shelter. Sophia's trained eye recognized the form immediately. A dog, large-bodied and seemingly motionless, lying dangerously close to the roadway. Her foot hit the brake before her mind had fully processed the sight. The truck skidded slightly before coming to a stop, hazard lights automatically flashing in the gloom. For a moment, Sophia remained frozen behind the wheel, her ranger's instinct to help warring with her personal determination to pass through this territory without engagement, without reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. "Damn it," she whispered, grabbing her rain jacket from the passenger seat. Whatever history tied her to this place, she couldn't drive past an injured animal, not with the skills and training she possessed, not with the oath she'd taken to protect the wilderness and all its inhabitants. The rain hammered against her shoulders as she stepped out of the truck, the collar of her jacket pulled high against the downpour. Water streamed down her face. As she approached the animal cautiously, her movements deliberate and measured, the ingrained protocol of someone who had handled countless wildlife encounters. "Hey there," she called softly, crouching several feet away. "Easy now." The dog didn't startle or flee as she approached, which immediately concerned her. Either it was too injured to move or too exhausted to care about potential threat. As she drew closer, details emerged through the curtain of rain. Not a wild animal, but clearly a domestic breed, a Belgian Malinois, once powerful but now alarmingly thin, coat matted with mud, and what appeared to be dried blood along one flank. Sophia's heart contracted painfully. Belgian Malinois, the same breed she had worked with for years, the elite service dogs of law enforcement and search and rescue operations. This was no ordinary stray. This was a working dog, or had been once. She inched closer, speaking in the low, calm tone she had used countless times during her years as a canine handler. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help." The dog shifted slightly, turning its head toward her voice, and Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Despite the rain and gathering darkness, she could make out the animal's face now, the distinctive mask marking, the set of the ears, and most strikingly, the small notch missing from the left ear, result of an early training accident she remembered with devastating clarity. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible above the storm. "It can't be." But even as denial formed on her lips, recognition flooded through her with absolute certainty. She knew this dog, knew every scar, every marking, every unique characteristic of the animal before her. This wasn't just any Belgian Malinois. Atlas! The name emerged unbidden, a ghost from her past given sudden voice. The dog's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His ears pricked forward, his tail gave a feeble thump against the wet pavement, and his eyes, those intelligent amber eyes she would have recognized anywhere, locked onto hers with a focus that transcended his obvious physical distress. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was recognition, it was memory. Sophia sank to her knees on the wet asphalt, heedless of the rain now soaking through her uniform pants. For 3 years, she had believed Atlas was dead, had been told directly by her former supervisor that her K9 partner had been fatally injured in a training accident just weeks after her departure from Blackridge. She had grieved him, had blamed herself for leaving him behind when she transferred, had carried that weight of guilt alongside all her other reasons for avoiding this place. Yet here he was, impossibly alive, but terribly neglected, appearing like an apparition on the very highway she had never meant to travel again. "How?" she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. Atlas made no attempt to move away, watching her with that same unwavering focus that had made him an exceptional search and rescue dog. As her fingers gently touched his rain-soaked fur, he released a soft whine, not of fear, but of recognition so profound it seemed to cut through the years of separation. The questions multiplied with dizzying speed. If Atlas was alive, why had she been told otherwise? How had he ended up here, alone and clearly abandoned? What had happened in the 3 years since she'd left him in the care of handlers she had trusted implicitly? But those questions would have to wait. Atlas needed immediate medical attention. His ribs protruded sharply beneath his dirty coat, and now that she was closer, she could see that his right hind leg was held at an awkward angle, an old injury improperly healed. With gentle movements born from years of handling injured animals, Sophia removed her rain jacket and carefully wrapped it around Atlas's trembling form. He didn't resist, instead leaning slightly into her touch as if surrendering to the first safe contact he had experienced in a long time. "I've got you," she murmured, gathering him carefully into her arms. Despite his size, he had lost so much. Weight that lifting him, while not easy, was far simpler than it should have been for a dog of his breed. "I've got you now." Atlas rested his head against her shoulder as she carried him to the truck, his body relaxing incrementally with each step. There was trust in that surrender, trust that by all logic should have been broken by years of apparent abandonment, yet somehow remained intact. Sophia placed him gently on the passenger seat, arranging an emergency blanket from her gear bag around his wet form. As she closed the door and circled back to the driver's side, the reality of the situation began to fully register through her initial shock. Atlas was alive. Atlas had been abandoned. Someone had lied to her, deliberately and completely, about the fate of the dog who had been her daily companion for 5 years, her partner in countless rescues and operations throughout the rugged terrain of Blackridge National Forest. As she slid back behind the wheel, Sophia glanced at the bedraggled animal now watching her with unnerving intensity from the passenger seat. The confusion and disbelief were rapidly crystallizing into something sharper, harder, a cold anger that provided sudden clarity amidst the emotional chaos. "We're going to get you help," she told Atlas, reaching out to gently stroke his head. "And then we're going to find out exactly what happened." She pulled back onto the highway, wipers fighting the continuing downpour as she calculated her options. The nearest veterinary clinic in the small town of Maplewood was 20 minutes ahead, Dr. Lena Collins, if she was still practicing. A good vet who had treated the ranger station's K9 units during Sophia's time at Blackridge. As she drove, Sophia couldn't stop glancing at Atlas, still struggling to reconcile his presence with the finality of what she had been told. He remained watchful, his gaze rarely leaving her face, as if afraid she might disappear if he looked away. Despite his emaciated condition and obvious neglect, there was no aggression in his demeanor, no indication of the mistreatment often seen in abandoned working dogs. Just exhaustion, pain, and that unsettling recognition. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. "Who would throw away a partner like you?" Atlas shifted slightly at the sound of her voice, extending one paw to rest it tentatively on her leg, a gesture so familiar it made her throat constrict. During their years together, it had been his way of maintaining contact during long drives, a physical connection between handler and dog that transcended their working relationship. That small action, so deliberate, so reminiscent of their past partnership, confirmed what Sophia had already sensed. This wasn't coincidence or random chance. Atlas hadn't simply wandered onto her path. He had been out there, perhaps for days, perhaps longer, on the one stretch of highway connecting Blackridge to the wider world. The highway she never took, except today, when circumstances beyond her control had forced this detour. It felt like more than coincidence. It felt like destiny. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The lights of Maplewood appeared through the rain as Sophia guided the truck down from the mountain pass. The small logging town looked much as she remembered. The central square with its veterans memorial, the diner where she had often stopped for coffee, the hardware store that doubled as the community's gathering place during winter storms. She drove past them without slowing, heading directly for the clinic on the eastern edge of town. Relief flooded through her as she spotted the illuminated sign of Collins Veterinary Services, still operating in the converted Victorian house where Dr. Collins had established her practice over 15 years ago. Sophia pulled into the gravel parking lot and turned to Atlas. "We're going to get you checked out," she told him, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need you to trust me, okay?" Atlas blinked slowly, then shifted his weight as if preparing to move. There was understanding in that response, the focused attention of a dog trained to follow commands, to trust his handler's judgment above his own instincts. Despite years of separation and whatever trauma he had endured, that training remained. Ingrained, Sophia circled to the passenger side and carefully lifted Atlas from the seat. He was lighter than she remembered, his once powerful muscles atrophied from neglect, but he held himself still in her arms, making the task easier despite his size. She carried him toward the clinic's entrance, using her back to push open the door as rain continued to pour around them. The reception area was empty, save for a young woman behind the desk, who looked up with surprise as Sophia entered carrying the large dog. "I need to see Dr. Collins," Sophia said without preamble. "It's an emergency." The receptionist took in the scene quickly. Sophia's ranger uniform, visible beneath her rain-drenched outer layer, the clearly distressed condition of the dog in her arms. "I'll get her right away," she responded, rising immediately. "You can take him straight to exam room 1. Sophia carried Atlas through the indicated doorway into a well-equipped examination room. She gently placed him on the stainless steel table, keeping one hand on his shoulder for reassurance. He remained unnaturally still, his amber eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that spoke volumes about his physical condition. A healthy Atlas would have been investigating the room, alert to new surroundings. This stillness represented either complete trust or profound exhaustion. Perhaps both. The door opened moments later as Dr. Lena Collins entered. Her silver-streaked, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She stopped abruptly, recognition flashing across her features. "Sophia Reed," she said, genuine surprise in her voice. "It's been 3 years," Sophia finished. "I wouldn't be here, but—" She gestured to Atlas, words failing her as the situation's impossibility hit her anew. Dr. Collins approached the table, professional assessment replacing her initial surprise. "What do we have here?" she asked, reaching for a pair of examination gloves. "It's Atlas," Sophia said, the words still feeling surreal. "My canine partner from Blackridge." The veterinarian's hands paused in the act of pulling on her gloves. "Atlas, but I thought—" "He died," Sophia completed, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "That's what I was told. That's what everyone was told, apparently." Dr. Collins frowned, studying the dog with renewed attention. She leaned closer, examining the notched ear and distinct facial markings, then the faded but still visible tattoo inside his inner thigh. The identification mark given to all official service dogs. "My God," she murmured, "it is him." She looked up at Sophia, genuine confusion in her eyes. "I didn't treat him for any fatal injury. In fact, I haven't seen this dog since your last routine checkup before you transferred out." This confirmation from an objective source that Atlas's reported death had indeed been fabricated sent a fresh wave of anger through Sophia. Someone had lied deliberately and comprehensively about the fate of her partner, and that lie had allowed Atlas to somehow end up abandoned, neglected, and injured on a remote highway. "I found him on Highway 23, Sophia explained, keeping her hand on Atlas's back as the vet began a careful examination. "He's malnourished, possibly dehydrated, and there's something wrong with his right hind leg." Dr. Collins worked with methodical care, checking Atlas's vital signs, examining his eyes and gums, assessing his overall condition with the thoroughness Sophia remembered from years of bringing the Blackridge Canine Unit for their routine checks. "He's severely undernourished," the vet confirmed after several minutes. "Dehydrated, though not critically so. The leg appears to be an old fracture that healed incorrectly, at least 6 months ago, I'd estimate. There are numerous smaller injuries, abrasions, some infected, pressure sores consistent with prolonged confinement without proper bedding." Each item on the growing list fueled the cold anger building in Sophia's chest. Atlas had been a highly valued service dog, worth tens of thousands of dollars in training alone, not to mention his exceptional record in search and rescue operations. He should have been either reassigned to another handler or honorably retired, not abandoned to suffer neglect and injury. "He's also got something embedded in his shoulder," Dr. Collins continued, parting the matted fur to reveal a small raised area. "I'll need to clean this properly to see what it is." As the vet worked, Sophia maintained constant contact with Atlas, stroking his head and murmuring reassurances. Despite his obvious discomfort, he remained calm under the examination, his trust in her presence evident in his relaxed posture despite the vet's probing. "There's something else," Dr. Collins said, as she carefully cleaned the area on his shoulder. "His microchip is still active. I can scan it, confirm his identity." "Beyond any doubt, do it," Sophia said immediately. The vet retrieved a handheld scanner and passed it over Atlas's shoulder blades, where service dogs were typically microchipped. After a moment, the device beeped, and Dr. Collins checked the display. K9 Atlas, ID number BRF436K9, assigned to Blackridge Ranger Station, handler Sophia Reed. She looked up, her expression grave. This is definitely your partner, Sophia, and according to this, he was never officially reassigned or decommissioned. The implications were staggering. On paper, Atlas had remained assigned to Sophia even after she transferred. If he hadn't died as reported and hadn't been reassigned, then someone had simply... what? Kept him without authorization. Abandoned a federal service animal. Both scenarios represented serious violations of protocol at best. Criminal negligence. At worst... As for this, Dr. Collins continued, having cleaned the embedded object in Atlas's shoulder, it's not what I expected. She held up a small device with a pair of tweezers. It's some kind of tracking chip, but not standard issue for K9 units. This is aftermarket, and it was placed below the official microchip, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Sophia stared at the tiny device. Someone was tracking him. Why? I can't answer that, the vet replied, placing the chip in a specimen container. But I can tell you it was inserted unprofessionally. The area is infected, which suggests it wasn't done under sterile conditions. The questions were multiplying faster than answers. Why fake Atlas's death? Why track him secretly? And how had he ended up alone on Highway 23, precisely where Sophia would find him on the one day she took that route? As Dr. Collins continued, the examination, Sophia's mind raced through potential explanations, each more disturbing than the last. Atlas had been an exceptional search dog, with a success rate that had drawn attention from agencies beyond the Forest Service. His tracking abilities in particular had been remarkable. She had seen him follow scent trails that other K9s had missed completely. I'd like to keep him overnight for fluids and observation, Dr. Collins said, breaking into Sophia's thoughts. He's stable, but I want to run some blood work and get a proper look at that leg. He's going to need time and proper nutrition to recover fully, but I don't see anything here that suggests permanent damage. Sophia nodded, relief mixing with the anger and confusion swirling inside her. I'll stay with him. I thought you might. The vet's expression softened slightly. We have a cot in the back room for overnight observation cases. It's not comfortable, but... It's fine, Sophia interrupted. I'm not leaving him again. Dr. Collins seemed to understand the weight behind those words. I'll get the technician to start the IV fluids and bring in some bedding for both of you. Left alone with Atlas while the vet prepared the treatment, Sophia leaned close to her, former partner, her forehead nearly touching his. I didn't know, she whispered fiercely. I would never have left if I'd known this would happen. Never. Atlas's response was subtle, but unmistakable. A slight shift to press his head against hers, a gesture of connection that transcended their years apart. In that moment, Sophia made a silent vow. She would discover the truth behind his fabricated death and subsequent abandonment, no matter where that investigation led. Someone had betrayed not just her, but Atlas himself, a dedicated service animal, who deserved honor and care, not neglect and abandonment. As Atlas finally relaxed into sleep under the influence of mild sedation and the comfort of her presence, Sophia's determination crystallized into something unshakable. She had spent 3 years avoiding Blackridge and the painful memories it contained. Now she would return deliberately, with purpose and resolve. This time she would be the one doing the tracking, and whatever truth lay buried at Blackridge Ranger Station, she would uncover it, for Atlas, for herself, and for the partnership that someone had tried and failed to permanently sever. Morning arrived at Collins Veterinary Services with pale sunlight filtering through the blinds of the treatment room. Sophia woke with a stiff neck from her night on the clinic's cot, but her discomfort vanished the moment she saw Atlas watching her from his bed on the floor, where he had insisted on sleeping, despite Dr. Collins's recommendation that he remain on the examination table for monitoring. His amber eyes tracked her movements with the same focused intelligence she remembered, though now shadowed by experiences she could only begin to imagine. The IV line providing him with fluids and antibiotics had been secured with a protective sleeve, evidence of Dr. Collins' understanding of working dogs' tendency to remove medical equipment. "Hey, partner," Sophia said softly, kneeling beside him. "How are you feeling this morning?" Atlas responded with a slight thump of his tail against the blanket, a reserved gesture that nonetheless conveyed recognition. In their working days, he had been vibrant and energetic, radiating the contained power characteristic of his breed. This muted version of her former partner reinforced Sophia's determination to understand exactly what had happened to him during the 3 years of their separation. Dr. Collins entered with a tablet in hand, her expression cautiously optimistic as she reviewed Atlas's overnight vital signs. "He's responding well to the fluids and antibiotics," she reported. "Blood work shows anemia consistent with malnutrition, but no organ damage or disease processes. With proper care and nutrition, his physical recovery should be straightforward." "And his leg?" Sophia asked, noting how Atlas kept the limb carefully positioned even at rest. The veterinarian's expression grew more reserved. "The X-rays confirm what I suspected. It's an old fracture that healed improperly. At this point, corrective surgery would be extensive, with no guarantee of full recovery. He'll likely always have some limitation in that leg." Sophia absorbed this information with a fresh surge of anger. Whatever had happened to Atlas, someone had denied him proper medical care for a significant injury, an unconscionable neglect for any animal, but particularly egregious for a highly trained service dog who had dedicated his life to saving others. "As for the tracking device," Dr. Collins continued, "I've preserved it if you want to have it analyzed. It's not standard government issue. It's smaller, more sophisticated, the kind of tech used for wildlife research or—" She hesitated. "Or surveillance," Sophia finished, the implications settling like lead in her stomach. Someone had tracked Atlas covertly, for purposes unknown, and outside official channels. "I'd like to keep him one more day for additional treatment," the vet said, "but after that, he'll need consistent care during his recovery. Do you have somewhere to take him?" The question highlighted a practical reality Sophia hadn't yet considered. Her current housing, a small apartment near the Regional Forest Service headquarters in Riverview, explicitly prohibited pets. Her position as a training coordinator for new rangers didn't include provisions for a service animal. Taking Atlas with her would require significant adjustments to her current life, but there was no question about her course of action. "He's coming with me," she said firmly. "I'll make whatever arrangements are necessary." Dr. Collins nodded, unsurprised. "I thought as much. I'll prepare a treatment protocol and nutrition plan for his recovery." She paused, then added carefully, "Sophia, whatever happened here goes beyond ordinary neglect. Atlas was a federal service animal. His fabricated death and subsequent condition potentially involve criminal violations." "I know," Sophia replied, her voice level despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. "And I intend to find out exactly what happened." After discussing Atlas's immediate care requirements, Sophia stepped outside to make several calls. The first was to her supervisor at the regional headquarters, requesting emergency personal leave, a rare action in her always reliable service record that underscored the situation's gravity. The second call, more difficult but equally necessary, was to the one person at Blackridge Ranger Station she still trusted implicitly. Marcus Torres had been a senior ranger when Sophia first arrived at Blackridge as a rookie. He had supported her application to become a K9 handler when others considered her too inexperienced, and had remained a steadfast mentor throughout her time there. If anyone could provide insight into what had happened after her departure, it would be Marcus. The call connected after 4 rings. "Torres," came the familiar deep voice, unchanged by the passing years. "Marcus, it's Sophia. Sophia Reed." A moment of startled silence followed. "Sophia, it's been 3 years, I know," she interrupted, the urgency of her situation overriding social niceties. "Marcus, I need information, and I need absolute honesty. It's about Atlas." Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had dropped to near a whisper. "Where are you calling from?" The question struck Sophia as odd, but she answered directly. "Maplewood, just outside Collins Veterinary Services." "Stay there," Marcus said, his tone deadly serious. "I'm on shift until 4, but I can be in Maplewood by 5. Don't call anyone else from Blackridge. Don't tell anyone where you are. And Sophia, watch your back." The call ended before she could press for clarification, leaving her staring at her phone with growing unease. Marcus had always been steady, level-headed, not given to dramatic warnings or conspiracy theories. His evident concern suggested the situation with Atlas extended far beyond simple neglect or administrative oversight. Returning to the treatment room, Sophia found Dr. Collins completing an examination of Atlas's injured leg. The vet looked up with a thoughtful expression. "I've been reviewing his case," she said, "and something doesn't add up. The pattern of his injuries isn't consistent with abandonment alone. The leg fracture, based on the callus formation, occurred approximately 8 months ago. But these pressure sores and more recent abrasions suggest confinement within the past few weeks. It's as if he was kept somewhere, not particularly well, but kept nonetheless, and then deliberately abandoned very recently." Sophia processed this information, adding it to the growing constellation of troubling facts. "Could you tell how long he might have been out on the highway? Based on his hydration levels and the state of the newer abrasions, I'd estimate no more than 48 hours, Dr. Collins replied, which raises the question, why would someone track a dog with sophisticated equipment, then suddenly abandon him? The question hung in the air, unanswerable with their current information. Sophia spent the remainder of the morning with Atlas, noting with relief his gradual acceptance of food and water. Though still severely underweight, his alert responses to the clinic staff and strengthening attachment to Sophia suggested his psychological resilience had survived whatever trauma he had endured. By early afternoon, Sophia had made arrangements for a pet-friendly extended-stay hotel in Riverview and purchased essential supplies for Atlas's care. The vet provided detailed instructions for his ongoing treatment, including the specialized diet necessary for safely reintroducing proper nutrition to his depleted system. The most important elements now are consistent care, proper nutrition and security, Dr. Collins emphasized as she finalized Atlas's discharge paperwork. He needs to know he's safe, that he won't be abandoned again. Sophia nodded, understanding. The psychological dimensions of rehabilitation for working dogs. He'll have that security, whatever it takes. As the afternoon light began to wane, Sophia received a text message from an unknown number. North end of Maplewood Park, 5:15. Come alone. The sender's identity wasn't specified, but the timing aligned with Marcus's promised arrival. Leaving. Atlas, resting comfortably under Dr. Collins's supervision for a final few hours, Sophia drove to the small community park at Maplewood's northern edge. The area was quiet in the fading light, a few locals walking dogs or jogging along the perimeter trail. Sophia positioned herself on a bench with clear sight lines to all park entrances, her ranger training automatically assessing potential approaches and exits. At precisely 5:15, a battered blue pickup truck pulled into the parking area. Marcus Torres emerged, his tall frame and broad shoulders instantly recognizable despite the civilian clothes that had replaced his usual ranger uniform. His dark hair showed more grey than Sophia remembered, and new lines had etched themselves around his eyes, but his purposeful stride remained unchanged as he approached her position. He didn't waste time with greetings. "You found Atlas?" he stated as he settled beside her on the bench, his eyes continually scanning their surroundings. "Yesterday on Highway 23, Sophia confirmed. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? I was told he died. Instead, I find him abandoned, malnourished, with an improperly healed fracture and an unauthorized tracking device embedded in his shoulder." Marcus's jaw tightened, his expression grim. "I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't prove it. After you transferred, Atlas was supposedly reassigned to Kane for advanced tracking operations." "Director Kane?" Sophia clarified, referencing Douglas Kane, the regional director who had taken over Blackridge operations shortly before her departure. "But the microchip still lists me as his handler." "That's because the reassignment was never officially processed," Marcus explained. "On paper, Atlas remained assigned to you. In practice, Kane's Special Projects team took him for what they called specialized deployment. When I questioned the arrangement, I was told it was classified, Homeland Security Protocols." Sophia frowned, processing this information against her knowledge of K9 service protocols. There's no provision for classified K9 deployments within the Forest Service, and even if there were, proper documentation would still be required. Atlas was still legally my partner. "I know," Marcus agreed. "When they announced his death 8 months ago, I requested the incident report. Was told it was filed at regional headquarters. When I followed up, headquarters had no record of any such report." He met her eyes directly. "I started asking more questions. A week later, I was assigned to the northern sector, 50 miles from the main station, minimal contact with other rangers." The implication was clear. Marcus had been deliberately isolated after expressing concerns about Atlas's status. "What was Kane doing with him?" Sophia pressed. "Atlas was trained for search and rescue, not security or enforcement." Marcus hesitated, then spoke in a lowered voice despite the empty park around them. "About 6 months after you left, Kane established what he called an interdepartmental task force operating out of the old Firewatch station on the Eastern Ridge. Officially, they were monitoring for illegal activity in the National Forest. Drug operations, illegal logging, that sort of thing. And unofficially? "That's what I tried to find out," Marcus replied. "The operation involved personnel who weren't Forest Service, men in unmarked vehicles, specialized equipment being installed at the watch station. Atlas was seen there several times with Kane, but whenever I asked about specific operations or findings, I hit a wall of need-to-know classification." Sophia's mind raced, connecting disparate pieces of information. The unauthorized tracking device, the covert operations, Atlas's specialized tracking abilities. A disturbing picture was beginning to form. 8 months ago, when they claimed Atlas died, was there anything unusual happening in the forest? Any special operations or incidents? Marcus's expression confirmed she was on the right track. A research team from Western State University was conducting an environmental survey in the eastern sector. They were documenting evidence of contamination in the watershed, potentially linked to the old mining operations near Blackridge Pass. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. Atlas had been renowned for his ability to track not just people, but specific substances, a skill Sophia had personally helped develop during their partnership. His unique olfactory capabilities had made him invaluable in environmental monitoring. Operations, capable of detecting contaminants at levels below standard testing equipment. They were using him to track contamination sources, Sophia realized aloud. But why the secrecy? Environmental monitoring is standard Forest Service work. Marcus leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper now. Because the primary contamination source appears to be on land leased to Northridge Mining Corporation, a company where Kane worked as security director before joining the Forest Service. The same company that just received preliminary approval for expanded operations in the forest. The implications were staggering. If Atlas had been used to identify contamination evidence that implicated a former employer of the regional director, evidence that could potentially derail a lucrative mining expansion, the motive for secrecy became clear. What remained unclear was why Atlas had been abandoned now, and with a tracking device still active. Something must have changed recently, Sophia said, thinking aloud. Something that made keeping Atlas too risky, but killing him too suspicious. Marcus nodded grimly. 3 days ago, the university research team announced they're returning next week for follow-up testing. Their preliminary findings were inconclusive, not enough evidence to stop the mining expansion, but enough to warrant further investigation. And suddenly Atlas appears on Highway 23, Sophia finished, at exactly the place and time where I would find him during my detour from the conservation conference. A cold realization settled in her chest. They knew my route had changed. They wanted me to find him. Which means they're watching you, Marcus concluded, and now me as well, most likely. The gravity of the situation expanded beyond Atlas's individual circumstances to potentially criminal conspiracy involving federal land, corporate interests, and environmental regulations. Atlas hadn't just been abandoned. He had been deliberately placed where Sophia would find him, creating a connection that would bring her back to Blackridge just as the research team returned to continue their investigation. Why would they want me involved now? Sophia wondered. If they were hiding evidence of contamination, the last thing they'd want is attention drawn to Atlas or the operations he was part of. Marcus considered this, his expression troubled. Unless Atlas isn't the evidence they're worried about, unless what they're really concerned about is what he found. Understanding dawned with terrible clarity. Atlas hadn't just been tracking contamination, he had located specific evidence that could prove Northridge Mining's responsibility for environmental damage. Evidence that might still exist somewhere in the forest. Evidence that Atlas, with his exceptional memory for locations and scents, could potentially lead someone back to. They're not worried about me finding Atlas, Sophia realized. They're worried about what he could show me if I brought him back to Blackridge. Which is exactly why you need to stay away, Marcus urged. Take Atlas and go back to Riverview. Report the unauthorized operations through official channels. Let the system handle this. But Sophia was already shaking her head, her decision crystallizing with absolute certainty. The system declared my partner dead while using him for unauthorized operations. The system allowed him to be injured without proper medical care, then abandoned him when he became inconvenient. Her voice hardened with resolve. No, Marcus, I'm not walking away from this. Atlas and I are coming back to Blackridge. Sophia, these people falsified federal records and deliberately mistreated a service animal to hide environmental violations, Marcus argued. What makes you think they wouldn't take more extreme measures to protect themselves if directly confronted? I'm not planning to confront them directly, she countered. Not yet, but Atlas and I were the best tracking team in the regional service for a reason. If there's evidence out there that he found once, we can find it again. Documentation that can't be dismissed or buried in bureaucracy. Marcus studied her for a long moment, recognizing the determination that had made her exceptional at her job. Finally, he sighed. You always were stubborn as hell. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small flash drive, placing it in her hand. Incident reports, patrol logs, and personnel assignments for the past 3 years. Everything. I could access that might be relevant. Sophia closed her fingers around the drive, touched by his foresight and risk-taking. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he replied grimly. "If you're coming back to Blackridge, you'll need more than old reports. You'll need current intelligence and backup." He stood, preparing to leave. "I'm still assigned to the northern sector, but I can arrange to be in radio contact. You should know that Kane's special operations have mostly disbanded since Atlas's death was announced. Just skeleton security at the watch station now." "Where would you start?" Sophia asked, respecting his years of experience and knowledge of the current situation. Marcus considered for a moment. "The university team is setting up base camp at Cedar Creek next Tuesday. If I were looking for environmental evidence, I'd start where they're focusing their new testing." He glanced at his watch, then surveyed the darkening park once more. "I should go. Too long in one location isn't wise if they're monitoring." As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him softly. "Why are you helping me, Marcus? You're risking your career." He paused, looking back with an expression that mixed sadness and resolve. "Because I trained you, recommended you for K9 handling, watched you and Atlas become the best team we ever had. When they told us he had died, I accepted it because I had no reason not to. I failed him then." His jaw tightened. "I won't fail him or you again." With that, he strode quickly back to his truck, leaving Sophia alone with the weight of new knowledge and the flash drive containing 3 years of potential evidence. As darkness settled fully over Maplewood Park, she returned to her vehicle with heightened awareness of her surroundings, noting each parked car, each shadowed figure on the perimeter trails. For the first time, she understood that finding Atlas hadn't been the end of a mystery, but the beginning of one far larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. What had begun as a shocking reunion had evolved into something with potential legal, environmental, and ethical implications that extended far beyond one handler and her K9 partner. Returning to the veterinary clinic, Sophia found Atlas waiting, alertly by the treatment room door, as if sensing her approach. Dr. Collins had removed his IV line and fitted him with a protective vest that covered the healing wound where the tracking device had been removed. "He's been watching the door since you left," the vet observed. "Classic handler attachment. Despite everything, his training and bond with you remain intact." Sophia knelt beside Atlas, gently stroking his head as she considered their next steps. Their partnership had always been based on mutual trust and protection. She had relied on his senses and instincts in the wilderness, while he had trusted her judgment and leadership in all situations. Now that foundation would be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. "We're going back, Atlas," she told him quietly, receiving a steady gaze of understanding in return. "But this time, we're the ones doing the tracking." As she helped Atlas into her truck, securing him carefully in the passenger seat, Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose that had been absent since her departure from Blackridge 3 years earlier. She had left the ranger station believing her most meaningful work was behind her, that the severing of her partnership with Atlas represented the end of that chapter in her life. Now she understood that their story had never truly concluded. It had merely entered an unexpected middle chapter, one that would require all the skills and courage they had developed together. Whatever awaited them at Blackridge, they would face it as they had always faced wilderness challenges, as partners, each complementing the other's strengths and compensating for vulnerabilities. The road ahead would be dangerous, the adversaries powerful, the evidence potentially difficult to uncover. But as Atlas leaned slightly against her arm, the familiar gesture of connection they had shared during countless missions, Sophia felt an absolute certainty that transcended the uncertainties surrounding them. They had found each other against impossible odds. They would discover the truth together, no matter what obstacles they faced, and in that shared purpose, both Handler and K9 would reclaim not just justice, but the profound bond that someone had tried and failed to permanently sever. The road to Blackridge wound through increasingly rugged terrain as Sophia guided her truck deeper into the national forest. Early morning mist clung to the pines, reducing visibility to ghostly silhouettes that appeared and vanished with each curve of the mountain highway. In the passenger seat, Atlas sat with uncharacteristic stillness, his attention divided between the passing landscape and Sophia herself, as if ensuring she remained real and not another phantom from his years of isolation. 3 days had passed since their reunion on Highway 23. 3 days of careful preparation at the extended stay hotel in Riverview, reviewing Marcus's files, researching Northridge Mining Corporation, and helping Atlas regain strength through proper nutrition and gentle rehabilitative exercises. Though still alarmingly thin, he had already shown remarkable improvement in alertness and mobility, his resilience a testament to the rigorous training and conditioning that had once made him an elite service animal. Sophia had used the time to develop a methodical approach to their investigation. The flash drive Marcus provided contained a wealth of information, patrol schedules, incident reports, personnel assignments, but also revealed troubling gaps. Entire weeks of activity around the Eastern Firewatch station had been omitted from official logs. Atlas had appeared in reports until 8 months ago, when his duties were suddenly classified as specialized deployment, without further documentation. Most significantly, she had discovered references to a project called Operation Watershed in email correspondence between Director Kane and several external contacts using private rather than government addresses. The operation had coincided with the university research team's initial visit and had involved specialized equipment requisitions, labeled as environmental monitoring tools. No reports detailing findings or conclusions had been filed. Now, as she approached the turnoff to Cedar Creek, the site Marcus had identified as the university team's upcoming base camp, Sophia mentally reviewed her cover story. She had obtained temporary contractor credentials through former colleagues at the regional headquarters, listing herself as an independent environmental consultant conducting preliminary assessments. The documentation wouldn't withstand deep scrutiny, but it should provide sufficient legitimacy for initial access to the research area. "Almost there," she told Atlas, who responded with increased alertness, his ears forward as they left the main highway for the narrower forest access road. Though she had been careful to remove the tracking device Dr. Collins had extracted from his shoulder, Sophia remained acutely aware of potential surveillance. Marcus's warning about being watched had prompted additional precautions. A different vehicle borrowed from a Riverview colleague, a circuitous route to Blackridge, and careful monitoring for any signs of pursuit. Cedar Creek emerged through the morning mist as they descended into a small valley surrounded by towering pines. The area had once been a popular camping destination, but environmental concerns had led to access restrictions in recent years. Now it served primarily as a research site, its isolation and proximity to multiple watersheds making it ideal for environmental monitoring. Sophia parked at the designated access point and checked her watch. The university team wasn't scheduled to arrive until the following day, giving her a critical window to assess the area without interference. Opening the passenger door, she helped Atlas navigate his careful descent to the ground, noting how he instinctively compensated for his injured leg while maintaining the dignified bearing characteristic of his breed. "Easy," she murmured as He tested his weight on the uneven ground. For today's preliminary investigation, she had decided against using his service vest. The official Forest Service identification might draw unwanted attention if they encountered other personnel. Instead, she had fitted him with a specialized harness that provided both support for his recovering frame and attachment points for the lightweight equipment she had assembled. The air carried the clean scent of pine and the mineral tang of the nearby creek, overlaid with the earthy richness of forest soil after recent rain. As they moved away from the vehicle and deeper into the natural environment, Sophia noticed an immediate change in Atlas's demeanor. A subtle but unmistakable shift into working mode that transcended his physical limitations. His nose lifted, sampling the air with methodical purpose, his movements becoming more fluid despite the lingering stiffness in his injured leg. This was his element. This was where their partnership had always found its truest expression. "Atlas, survey," Sophia commanded softly, using the train directive that instructed him to conduct a general assessment of their surroundings rather than tracking a specific target. Though years had passed since their last field operation, he responded immediately to the familiar command, beginning a careful pattern of investigation along the perimeter of the clearing. Sophia followed at a measured distance, allowing him freedom of movement while remaining close enough to observe his signals. As a handler, she had always been attuned to Atlas's subtle communications, the particular angle of his ears when detecting unusual scents, the specific tension in his posture when identifying potential concerns, the almost imperceptible changes in breathing that indicated heightened interest. For the next hour, they worked their way methodically towards Cedar Creek itself, Sophia documenting their route with GPS coordinates and photographs of the surrounding terrain. Atlas moved with increasing confidence as familiar work patterns reactivated muscle memory and training protocols. When they reached the creek bank, he paused, attention fixed on the clear, swift-moving water with unusual intensity. "What is it?" Sophia asked, moving closer. During their years together, Atlas had demonstrated an exceptional ability to detect contaminants in water, a skill she had helped develop after discovering his unusual sensitivity to chemical changes. Imperceptible to human senses or standard equipment, they had used this capability in several environmental monitoring operations, locating illegal dumping sites and contamination sources with remarkable accuracy. Atlas looked from the water to Sophia and back again, then moved deliberately upstream, maintaining proximity to the creek bank. Sophia followed, her internal alert level rising. This wasn't random exploration. This was tracking behavior, focused, intentional movement toward a specific target. For nearly half a mile, they followed the creek's winding path through increasingly dense forest. Atlas maintained his concentration despite the challenging terrain, navigating exposed roots and slippery rocks with determined care. Finally, he stopped at a narrow tributary that joined Cedar Creek from the eastern slope, a small, nearly hidden waterway flowing down from the direction of Black Ridge Pass and the old mining areas beyond. Here his behavior shifted from tracking to alert indication. He stood rigidly beside the tributary, then looked directly at Sophia with the unmistakable focused gaze that had always signaled significant findings during their operational days. Sophia knelt beside the small stream, careful not to disturb the water or surrounding soil. Nothing appeared unusual to the naked eye. The water ran clear over smooth stones, carrying occasional leaves and forest debris. She removed specialized testing equipment from her pack, portable meters for basic chemical composition, pH levels, and conductivity that would provide preliminary data on water quality. The results confirmed her suspicions. While not visibly polluted, the water showed elevated levels of heavy metals and sulfates, consistent with mining runoff, contamination subtle enough to escape casual observation, but potentially significant for overall watershed health. More sophisticated laboratory analysis would be needed to identify specific compounds and concentrations, but Atlas had clearly detected anomalies that warranted further investigation. "Good boy," Sophia praised quietly, documenting the location and preliminary readings in her field notebook. Atlas maintained his position by the tributary, still focused on the water with professional intensity. His behavior suggested this wasn't merely an isolated finding, but potentially part of a larger pattern he had previously tracked. Acting on intuition built from years of partnership, Sophia gave a new command. "Atlas, source." This directive instructed him to track contamination to its origin, a specialized application of his training that they had developed during environmental monitoring operations. Without hesitation, Atlas turned away from Cedar Creek and began moving eastward, along the tributary, following its path up the sloping terrain toward the ridge beyond. The vegetation grew denser as they ascended, the forest floor covered with ferns and underbrush that made progress slower. Atlas maintained his focus despite these obstacles, pushing forward with determination that transcended his physical limitations. Sophia stayed close behind, documenting their route while remaining vigilant for signs of human activity or monitoring equipment. After approximately 20 minutes of steady climbing, Atlas stopped abruptly, his posture alerting Sophia to potential concern. She froze immediately, scanning their surroundings for whatever had triggered his response. The forest appeared empty, silent, except for distant birdsong and the gentle rustle of wind through pine needles. Then she saw it, nearly hidden among the trees ahead, a small device mounted approximately 7 feet up the trunk of a massive pine. The equipment was compact, weatherproofed and painted in forest camouflage that made it nearly invisible against the bark. Only its small, regularly blinking indicator light betrayed its presence. A surveillance camera, positioned to monitor the very path they were following along the tributary. Sophia signaled Atlas to remain still while she assessed their situation. The camera's field of view appeared directed primarily along the waterway, suggesting it was monitoring the tributary itself rather than the broader forest. Its presence confirmed that whatever Atlas was tracking held sufficient importance to warrant ongoing surveillance. Surveillance that operated outside standard Forest Service protocols, which would have required clear marking and documentation of all monitoring equipment. They needed to continue their investigation without triggering alerts from the camera. Sophia signaled Atlas to follow as she led them in a wide arc around the device's likely visual range, using natural terrain features and dense vegetation for concealment. Once clear, they resumed tracking along the tributary from a safer vantage point slightly removed from the water's edge. The tributary narrowed as they continued to ascend, eventually leading them to a rocky outcropping where the water emerged. From an underground spring, Atlas circled this area with heightened attention, his behavior indicating multiple scent sources of interest. Sophia documented the location, collecting water samples and soil specimens for later analysis. What struck her as particularly significant wasn't just the contamination itself, but the deliberate monitoring of this remote, seemingly unremarkable water source. Someone had gone to considerable effort to track activity around this tributary, effort that suggested awareness of its importance and concern about potential discovery. As they prepared to widen their search perimeter around the spring, a distant mechanical sound froze them both in place, the distinctive rumble of vehicle engines approaching from the forest road below. Sophia checked her watch with alarm. The university research team wasn't due until tomorrow, and standard Forest Service patrols weren't scheduled for this sector, according to Marcus's information. unscheduled visitors presented potential complications they couldn't afford at this early stage of investigation. Moving quickly but quietly, Sophia led Atlas to a concealed position among dense vegetation, overlooking the approach to Cedar Creek. From this vantage point, they could observe without being easily detected. Two unmarked black SUVs emerged from the forest road, parking in the same clearing where Sophia had left her borrowed vehicle. 4 men exited the vehicles, all in civilian clothing rather than Forest Service uniforms, all moving with the practiced efficiency of security personnel. They conducted a brief but thorough examination of her truck, photographing the license plate and looking through the windows before engaging in conversation too distant to overhear. Sophia recognized one figure immediately, the tall, broad-shouldered form of Director Douglas Kane, his silver hair distinctive even at this distance. His presence validated her suspicions about ongoing surveillance. Either they had been followed. Despite her precautions, or monitoring equipment along the road had alerted Kane's team to their arrival. After several minutes of discussion, 2 men returned to one SUV while Kane and the remaining individual began following the path towards Cedar Creek, the same route Sophia and Atlas had taken earlier. Their movements were purposeful, suggesting they were tracking specific coordinates rather than conducting a general patrol. "Time to move," Sophia whispered to Atlas, recognizing the immediate need to evacuate before their position was compromised. They couldn't return to the truck without risking direct confrontation. Instead, they needed an alternate route back to civilization, preferably one that would provide additional intelligence rather than merely escape. Consulting her topographical map, Sophia identified a promising option: the eastern ridge above. Them connected to a fire access road that eventually joined the main highway several miles north of their current position. The route would be challenging, particularly for Atlas with his injured leg, but it offered their best chance of avoiding detection while potentially providing access to the old Firewatch station Marcus had identified as Kane's former operations center. With a soft command and hand signal, Sophia directed Atlas to follow as they began ascending the steeper terrain toward the ridge. They moved with careful precision, minimizing noise and disturbance of vegetation that might signal their passage. Atlas demonstrated his exceptional training once again, maintaining close proximity while navigating the difficult landscape with remarkable soundlessness despite his physical limitations. The climb was arduous, especially as they left the tributary's path for more rugged terrain. Sophia maintained frequent rest intervals, monitoring Atlas closely for signs of excessive fatigue. Though his determination never wavered, she could see the toll the journey was taking on his still recovering body, the slight tremor in his injured leg, the more labored breathing as they gained elevation. "You're doing great," she encouraged softly during one rest period, offering water and a small protein supplement Dr. Collins had recommended for his rehabilitation. Atlas accepted both with the focused efficiency of a working dog who understood the importance of maintaining operational capacity. Despite years of separation and whatever mistreatment he had endured, his fundamental training and partnership orientation remained intact, a testament to the profound bond they had established during their years together. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the ridgeline, the forest canopy thinning to provide occasional views across the broader landscape of Black Ridge National Forest. From this elevation, the vastness of the protected wilderness spread in all directions. Thousands of acres of pine forest, hidden valleys, and rugged mountains that had once been their daily patrol territory. Somewhere within that expanse lay evidence of environmental violations significant enough to warrant elaborate concealment and monitoring. The fire access road appeared as they crested the final slope, a narrow, minimally maintained track used primarily for emergency response during fire season. Sophia consulted her map again, confirming their position relative to both the highway beyond and the old Firewatch station marked approximately 2 miles ahead along the ridge. "What do you think, partner?" she asked Atlas quietly. "Check out the station before heading back?" Atlas's alert posture and focused gaze toward the eastern ridge needed no translation. Despite his fatigue, he remained operational, his training and natural working drive overriding physical discomfort. Sophia made the decision, balancing investigative opportunity against his welfare. They would approach the Firewatch station for preliminary reconnaissance, but prioritize his recovery by finding transportation back to their secure location afterward. As they moved along the ridgeline, Sophia's tactical awareness heightened. The Firewatch station had served as Kane's operational headquarters for the mysterious Operation Watershed, according to Marcus's information. Though supposedly operating with minimal staffing now, it represented both valuable intelligence potential and significant risk of discovery. They approached with maximum caution, using natural cover and maintaining awareness of potential security measures. From their concealed position approximately 200 yards from the station, Sophia surveyed the site with field binoculars, while Atlas rested beside her. The Firewatch station occupied a commanding position atop a rocky promontory, its original tower structure supplemented by newer outbuildings and equipment installations. Solar panels had been mounted on the tower roof, providing power to various electronic systems that hadn't been part of the station's original fire monitoring purpose. A single white pickup truck with Forest Service markings was parked beside the main building, indicating at least minimal current staffing. Most notably, a sophisticated communications array had been installed beside the tower, multiple antenna types suggesting capabilities far beyond standard Forest Service operations. The equipment resembled systems Sophia had previously encountered during joint operations with Homeland Security agencies, designed for long-range data transmission and remote site monitoring. "Quite an upgrade for a seasonal Firewatch station," she murmured, documenting the installation with discreet photography. The presence of such equipment at a nominally standard Forest Service facility raised significant questions about both authorization and purpose, questions that potentially connected to Atlas's unauthorized use in specialized deployments. As she continued her observation, movement at the main building drew her attention. A figure emerged onto the elevated deck surrounding the tower, a slender woman in Forest Service uniform carrying what appeared to be monitoring equipment. She proceeded to check various sensors and equipment installations with practiced efficiency before returning inside. The brief appearance provided insufficient information to identify the individual or determine her role in potential unauthorized operations. However, her presence confirmed current staffing and operational status of the facility, critical intelligence for planning any future investigation of the site. With daylight beginning to wane and Atlas showing increasing signs of fatigue, Sophia made the tactical decision to withdraw. They had gathered valuable preliminary information while avoiding detection, a successful first reconnaissance that would inform more targeted investigation once Atlas had recovered further and additional resources could be coordinated with Marcus. They retreated along the fire access road, maintaining vigilance until reaching the point where it descended toward the main highway. Here, Sophia faced a logistical challenge. Their borrowed truck remained at Cedar Creek, potentially under surveillance. By Kane's team, they needed alternative transportation back to their secure accommodation in Riverview. The solution presented itself as they approached the highway junction, a ranger station substation used primarily for equipment storage and emergency response during high fire danger seasons. According to Marcus's files, the facility maintained several vehicles for field operations, accessed via secure keypad using standard ranger authentication codes. Sophia's credentials had been deactivated upon her transfer, but Marcus had included current access codes in his data cache, information he had provided specifically for emergency situations like their current predicament. Using these codes represented a significant escalation in their investigation, potentially traceable if security logs were monitored. However, the alternative meant leaving Atlas to an extended hike beyond his current physical capacity. Worth the risk, Sophia decided aloud, receiving Atlas's steady gaze in response, the same unshakable trust he had always placed in her tactical decisions during their operational partnership. The substation appeared deserted as they approached in the gathering dusk, its perimeter secured by standard Forest Service fencing rather than enhanced security measures. Sophia led Atlas to a concealed position with good visibility of the compound, observing for several minutes to confirm absence of personnel before approaching the vehicle storage building. The access keypad accepted Marcus's code without complications, the reinforced door unlocking with a mechanical click that sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet facility. Inside, 3 Forest Service trucks sat in various states of readiness, maintained for emergency deployment during fire season. Selecting the vehicle positioned for easiest departure, Sophia helped Atlas into the passenger seat before quickly inspecting the truck for tracking devices or monitoring equipment. Finding nothing suspicious, she used the ignition codes from Marcus's data to start the engine, relief washing through her as the truck rumbled to life without security alerts or complications. As they pulled onto the highway, heading south toward Riverview, Sophia glanced at Atlas's exhausted but satisfied posture beside her. Despite the improvised extraction and unauthorized vehicle acquisition, they had achieved their primary objectives, confirming contamination in the watershed, identifying surveillance of the affected tributary, and conducting preliminary reconnaissance of Kane's operational headquarters. More importantly, they had re-established their working partnership under field conditions, proving that despite physical limitations and years of separation, their operational capabilities remained substantial when combined. Atlas had demonstrated not just memory of his training, but ongoing commitment to their shared mission, a resilience that transcended the trauma and neglect he had endured. The investigation had now advanced from theoretical possibility to active operation, with concrete evidence supporting their concerns about environmental violations and unauthorized use of Forest Service resources. The risks had similarly escalated, with Kane's direct involvement confirming high-level interest in monitoring and potentially suppressing their activities. As darkness settled over the national forest and the lights of smaller communities began to appear along the highway, Sophia reached over to gently stroke Atlas's head, a gesture of appreciation that transcended formal handler protocols. "We've got a long way to go," she told him quietly, "but we've made a start, together." Atlas leaned slightly into her touch, his amber eyes reflecting the dashboard lights as he maintained his characteristic alertness despite evident fatigue. In that moment of connection, something profoundly important solidified between them. Not just the reactivation of their working partnership, but the restoration of a bond that had survived deliberate separation, fabricated death, and institutional betrayal. Whatever truth awaited them at Black Ridge, whatever forces had conspired to use and discard a dedicated service animal when he became inconvenient, they would face it as they had always faced wilderness challenges, as partners with absolute trust in each other's capabilities and unwavering commitment to their shared purpose. The game had changed from simple recovery to active investigation. The opponents had been identified as both powerful and willing to operate outside legal boundaries. The stakes extended beyond personal justice to potential environmental crimes affecting public lands and resources. Yet as they continued south toward temporary sanctuary, Both Handler and K9 carried with them something their adversaries likely hadn't calculated: the extraordinary power of a partnership reforged through adversity, now focused with singular purpose on uncovering truth that someone had gone to elaborate lengths to conceal. In finding each other against impossible odds, they had discovered not just companionship, but renewed mission, a purpose that aligned their exceptional capabilities with justice larger than themselves. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them not as victims seeking redress, but as investigators pursuing truth, their shared determination a force more powerful than the considerable obstacles arrayed against them. The extended stay hotel room in Riverview had transformed over 3 days into an impromptu investigation headquarters. Maps of Blackridge National Forest covered one wall, marked with colored pins indicating key locations. The tributary where Atlas had detected contamination, the Firewatch station with its sophisticated communications array, Cedar Creek, where the university research team would soon establish their base camp. Timeline notations tracked known events: Atlas's death announcement, the university's initial testing, the formation of Kane's Special Operations Unit. Sophia sat at the small desk, reviewing photographs from their reconnaissance, while Atlas rested on a specialized orthopedic bed she'd purchased for his rehabilitation. Though still requiring significant recovery time, he had shown remarkable resilience after their challenging field excursion. Dr. Collins's detailed nutrition and exercise plan was yielding visible improvements, his coat regaining luster, muscle, tone gradually returning to his once powerful frame. The borrowed Forest Service vehicle had been abandoned at a public trailhead 20 miles outside Riverview, wiped clean of fingerprints and any evidence of their presence. An anonymous tip to dispatch had reported the found vehicle, allowing its recovery without direct connection to Sophia. This precaution seemed increasingly justified as her investigation deepened. Research into Northridge Mining Corporation had revealed troubling patterns. The company had expanded operations significantly in the past decade, acquiring mining rights on lands adjacent to Blackridge National Forest. Environmental impact assessments for these expansions had been expedited through regulatory channels with minimal public review. Approvals coinciding with Douglas Kane's appointment as Regional Director for the Forest Service after 15 years as Northridge's Security Chief. Most recently, preliminary approval had been granted for expanded operations that would bring mining activities within a half-mile of the forest boundary, a proposal that had faced opposition from environmental groups concerned about watershed impacts. The university research team's initial findings had been cited in public comments opposing the expansion, though their results had been deemed inconclusive in the final assessment. Sophia's phone chimed with an encrypted message, the secure communication method she had established with Marcus after their meeting in Maplewood. His message was brief but significant. University team arrived Cedar Creek. Equipment installation tomorrow. K investigating borrowed vehicle. The update confirmed both progress of the environmental researchers and Kane's awareness of the unauthorized vehicle use, a complication that necessitated increased caution in their next moves. The university team's presence created both opportunity and challenge, potential allies in environmental investigation, but also increased activity that might complicate covert operations. Sophia crossed to the window, scanning the parking lot and surrounding area for unfamiliar vehicles or surveillance indicators. Hotel security cameras had provided welcome additional protection, their constant monitoring making direct observation of her room difficult without attracting attention. Still, she maintained vigilance, varying routines, and conducting regular counter-surveillance checks during necessary outings. Atlas lifted his head as she moved, instantly alert despite his resting position. His response to potential operational activity remained immediate and focused, evidence of training so deeply ingrained it had survived years of separation and mistreatment. Whatever Kane's team had used him for during those years, they had maintained his essential working capabilities while neglecting his physical welfare once his usefulness ended. "We need more concrete evidence," Sophia told him, thinking aloud as she often had during their partnership. "Water samples and observations won't be enough against someone with Kane's connections. We need documentation of the operation itself, proof of what they were using you for and why it needed to be hidden." Marcus's data cache had provided valuable context, but limited actionable evidence. Email references to Operation Watershed were deliberately vague, equipment requisitions justified with generic environmental monitoring purposes. The university researchers might have relevant scientific data, but approaching them directly risked exposing the investigation before sufficient evidence had been secured. As she considered their options, Sophia returned to a detail from their reconnaissance that had initially seemed peripheral, but now took on potentially greater significance. The Forest Service employee they had observed at the fire watch station. The woman's presence in what was supposedly a minimally staffed facility suggested continuing operations of some kind, perhaps including records or equipment related to Atlas's unauthorized deployments. Sophia retrieved her field notebook, reviewing her observations of the individual: slender build, approximately 5'6", brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, standard Forest Service uniform. While not sufficient for definitive identification, these details might narrow possibilities when cross-referenced against personnel assignments in Marcus's files. For the next hour, she methodically compared her observations against personnel records, focusing on staff assigned to specialized environmental monitoring or security operations. 3 potential matches emerged from the data, but one stood out with particular relevance. Dr. Elise Harrington, environmental scientist, transferred to Blackridge 2 years ago from the EPA's Regional Enforcement Division. Her credentials included specialized training in contamination monitoring and watershed protection, expertise that aligned with the suspected focus of Kane's covert operations. Most significantly, Harrington's transfer had coincided with the formation of Kane's Special Projects team in the initial phases of Operation Watershed. Unlike other team members who had returned to regular duties after the operation's apparent conclusion, Harrington remained assigned to ongoing environmental monitoring at remote stations, a designation that could explain her current presence at the Firewatch station. As a scientist, rather than law enforcement or security personnel, Harrington represented a potentially different perspective on the operation, someone whose professional ethics might conflict with environmental violations or regulatory circumvention. If she had been involved in the technical aspects of Atlas's deployments, rather than the administrative deception surrounding them, she might possess both critical information and potential willingness to reveal it under appropriate circumstances. Sophia's contemplation was interrupted by a distinctive change in Atlas's demeanor, a subtle tensing of his body and shift in his attention toward the hotel room door. His reaction wasn't the sharp alert of perceived threat, but the focused anticipation of recognized approach. Seconds later, a soft knock confirmed his awareness had preceded her own. Moving with practiced caution, Sophia approached the door and checked the security peephole. Marcus Torres stood in the hallway, alone and dressed in civilian clothing rather than his ranger uniform. Though they had established secure communication protocols, his unexpected physical appearance raised immediate concerns about potential compromise or emergency developments. Maintaining tactical preparedness, Sophia positioned Atlas with hand, signals before opening the door just enough to confirm Marcus's identity. Unexpected visit, she noted quietly, scanning the hallway behind him. Necessary, he replied, his expression conveying urgency without alarm. Information that couldn't wait for encrypted channels. Sophia admitted him quickly, securing the doctor while Atlas conducted his own assessment, approaching Marcus with professional inspection rather than social greeting, confirming identity through scent before returning to tactical position beside Sophia. Despite their previous meeting in Maplewood, Atlas maintained operational protocol, his behavior reflecting the seriousness of their current circumstances rather than familiarity. Marcus nodded with approval at the K9's response. Still the best. Trained partner in the service, he observed, before turning to Sophia with increased gravity. The university team brought specialized testing equipment, ground-penetrating radar, comprehensive water analysis systems. Kane's surveillance doubled overnight. Whatever they're concerned about being found goes beyond standard contamination issues. Sophia absorbed this development, integrating it with their existing intelligence. Did you get any indication of specific targets for their testing? Better, Marcus replied, removing a folded paper from his jacket pocket. One of the researchers is a former student of mine. When I expressed interest in their methodology, she shared their testing grid, locations prioritized based on preliminary findings from their earlier survey. He spread the document on the desk, revealing a topographical map overlaid with numbered coordinates. The marked testing locations created a clear pattern leading from Cedar Creek along the same tributary Atlas had tracked during their reconnaissance. Continuing beyond the spring, they had identified two areas higher on the eastern slope toward Blackridge Pass. This confirms Atlas was tracking correctly, Sophia noted, comparing the research coordinates with her field notes. But it doesn't. Explain why Kane would risk using a Forest Service K9 for potentially illegal surveillance of contamination sources. Environmental monitoring is standard procedure. It wouldn't require the secrecy they've maintained. Marcus's expression darkened. I think it goes beyond monitoring. During my own investigation after Atlas's death was announced, I discovered discrepancies in the original environmental impact assessment for Northridge's expansion. Sections addressing groundwater migration patterns were revised between draft and final submission, revisions that significantly altered projected contamination, risks from high probability to minimal concern. This revelation added a troubling dimension to their developing understanding. If Kane had used Forest Service resources, including Atlas, to identify contamination concerns and then deliberately falsified or suppressed that information to benefit his former employer, the implications extended beyond administrative misconduct to potential criminal conspiracy. They needed Atlas because traditional testing wasn't showing the full picture, Sophia reasoned, the operational logic becoming clearer. His sensory capabilities could detect contaminants at levels below standard equipment thresholds or identify migration patterns that weren't appearing in conventional models. Marcus nodded grimly. And once the university researchers announced their return with advanced equipment that might validate what Atlas had already found, he became a liability rather than an asset, Sophia finished, the pieces aligning with disturbing clarity. They couldn't risk him being found and connected to the operation, but eliminating a federal service animal would trigger too many questions, so they abandoned him where he would likely be found by civilian hikers or local animal control, removed from the situation but without direct evidence of their involvement. Except he wasn't found by hikers, Marcus observed. He found you despite impossible odds. And that's what worries me most about your safety now. Kane's team is escalating their surveillance of the university researchers, pulling in personnel from regional headquarters, establishing perimeter monitoring around Cedar Creek. They're preparing for something significant, and if they discover You've returned with Atlas. They'll consider us both active threats, Sophia acknowledged, understanding the enhanced risk without requiring elaboration. Having orchestrated the elaborate deception around Atlas's death and abandoned him to likely death by exposure or starvation, Kane's team had demonstrated willingness to take extreme measures to protect their operation. Two individuals investigating without institutional support represented vulnerable targets if their activities were discovered. Yet the escalating surveillance of the university team also presented strategic opportunity. Concentration of resources around Cedar Creek potentially reduced security at other key locations, including the Firewatch station where operational records or equipment might still be housed. I need to speak with Dr. Harrington, Sophia decided, sharing her earlier analysis of the scientist's potential significance. If she was involved in the technical aspects of Atlas's deployments, she might have documentation we need, especially if her scientific ethics conflict with Kane's apparent suppression of environmental findings. Marcus considered this approach, his tactical experience evident in his measured response. Possible but risky. Direct approach could trigger immediate reporting to Kane if she's fully aligned with his operation. That's why I need leverage. Burst, Sophia explained, a strategy forming as she processed their combined intelligence. The university research grid and Atlas's tracking abilities give us a significant advantage. We can identify exactly what Kane's team is trying to conceal before approaching Harrington. With concrete evidence in hand, we create opportunity for her to make a choice based on scientific integrity rather than institutional loyalty. This approach aligned with Sophia's assessment of motivational psychology, a core component of her canine handling expertise. Understanding what drove individuals, what core values might transcend situational pressures, had been essential in developing Atlas's exceptional performance. The same principles could apply to human subjects of investigation. The university team begins actual testing tomorrow, Marcus noted, checking his watch. Kane's surveillance will be focused on their activities, creating a potential window for reconnaissance of the areas they haven't reached yet. Specifically, these coordinates higher on the eastern slope. He indicated locations on the testing grid that extended beyond the spring they had already identified, areas that would not be examined by the researchers until later in their scheduled program. If Atlas could lead them to specific evidence at these locations before the university team arrived, they would gain both tactical advantage and potential leverage for approaching Harrington. The strategy involves significant risk operating in remote terrain under potential surveillance, with Atlas still recovering from his ordeal. Yet it also offered their best opportunity to advance the investigation before Kane's team could implement whatever countermeasures they were preparing against the university researchers. We'll need specialized equipment, Sophia said, mentally cataloging requirements for environmental sampling and documentation that would stand up to potential legal scrutiny. And transportation that won't trigger alerts if they're monitoring. Vehicle movements in the area? Marcus nodded, already considering logistics. I can provide both. My patrol vehicle has standard environmental testing gear, and I'm scheduled for Eastern Sector rounds tomorrow. Legitimate presence in the target area. We can establish rendezvous coordinates away from surveillance points. As they developed operational details, Atlas watched with focused attention, his body language shifting subtly toward readiness despite his continued need for physical recovery. His responsiveness to the developing mission plan demonstrated not just training, but eagerness to resume purposeful work. The drive that had made him an exceptional service animal before his unauthorized deployment and subsequent abandonment. Sophia monitored his condition with the experienced assessment of a veteran handler, balancing operational requirements against his rehabilitation needs. The mission would demand significant physical exertion in challenging terrain, potentially exceeding current veterinary recommendations for his recovery timeline. Yet she also recognized the psychological importance of meaningful engagement for a working dog of his caliber, the therapeutic value of purposeful activity in counteracting trauma of extended neglect. We'll modify the operational approach to accommodate his current capabilities, she told Marcus, who understood immediately both the practical and ethical dimensions of her concern. Shorter duration, additional rest intervals, emphasis on scent detection rather than physical tracking over extended distances. With core strategy established, they finalized tactical details, communications protocols, equipment distribution, extraction contingencies. If surveillance was detected, Marcus would depart separately to maintain operational security, using indirect routes and counter-surveillance measures to ensure his movements weren't connected to Sophia's location. As he prepared to leave, Marcus paused to properly acknowledge Atlas, kneeling to the canine's level with the respectful approach appropriate for a working dog rather than a pet. "You did what none of us could," he told the Belgian Malinois quietly. "You survived to bring the truth home." Atlas maintained professional composure, accepting the acknowledgement with the dignified reserve characteristic of his training and breed. Yet Sophia noted the subtle indications of recognition in his posture, awareness of Marcus as an allied figure in their current mission, rather than merely tolerated presence. After Marcus's departure, Sophia completed their preparation for tomorrow's operation, assembling essential gear and reviewing topographical details of their target area. Throughout these preparations, Atlas maintained attentive proximity, his focused engagement reflecting understanding of impending operational activity, despite the absence of direct commands or equipment indicators. During their final equipment check, Sophia retrieved a specialized item she had acquired during their days in Riverview, a lightweight tactical vest designed for K9s recovering from injury. Unlike standard service vests, this equipment provided additional support for Atlas's healing frame while incorporating modest carrying capacity for small equipment items. Though not official Forest Service issue, its professional-grade construction would enable him to participate in the operation with necessary support while maintaining operational capability. As she fitted the vest for proper sizing, Atlas stood, with perfect stillness, the familiar routine of equipment preparation triggering ingrained working protocols, despite years of separation from standard service procedures. His cooperation transcended simple obedience, demonstrating the profound partnership orientation that had made their team exceptional, mutual understanding that equipment preparation represented shared purpose rather than imposed direction. "Tomorrow we find the truth," Sophia told him as she completed the fitting, her voice carrying the quiet assurance that had always characterized their operational communications. "Whatever they tried to hide, whatever they used you to find and then buried, we bring it into the light." Atlas met her gaze with steady attention, his posture reflecting readiness despite physical limitations that would have defeated lesser working dogs. In that moment of connection, Sophia recognized once again the extraordinary resilience he embodied. Not just physical survival against devastating odds, but preservation of purpose and partnership through years of isolation and mistreatment. His recovery represented more than rehabilitation of a valuable service animal. It embodied restoration of justice systematically denied, justice for a dedicated K9 partner betrayed by the very institution he had served, and for environmental protections potentially compromised through calculated deception. Their shared mission had evolved from personal redress to pursuit of truth, with far-reaching implications for public lands and regulatory integrity. As darkness settled over Riverview, and final preparation gave way to necessary rest before tomorrow's operation, Sophia reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance storm, a detour never meant to be taken, an abandoned K9 who should never have survived, coincidences that collectively defied statistical probability. Yet here they were, Handler and K9 reunited against impossible odds, their exceptional capabilities realigned toward uncovering truth that powerful interests had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. Whatever awaited them on the eastern slope tomorrow, they would face it as they had always faced wilderness challenges, as partners with absolute trust in each other's capabilities and unwavering commitment to their shared purpose. In that knowledge lay not just operational confidence, but profound affirmation of resilience itself, the capacity to transform betrayal and abandonment into renewed purpose, to reclaim partnership that transcended institutional failure, to pursue justice larger than themselves with the unique capabilities they possessed. Tomorrow would bring risk, challenge, and potential confrontation with forces that had already demonstrated willingness to operate outside legal and ethical boundaries. Yet it would also bring opportunity to validate Atlas's extraordinary survival, to ensure his suffering served purpose beyond mere endurance, transforming personal injustice into catalyst for truth that might otherwise remain buried in the remote watersheds of Blackridge National Forest. As Atlas finally settled into sleep beside her bed, position chosen for tactical oversight of entry points rather than comfort, Sophia recognized the deeper significance of their impending operation. Beyond evidence collection and potential leverage for approaching Dr. Harrington lay opportunity for Atlas himself to transform from victim of institutional betrayal to active agent of resolution, reclaiming his identity as exceptional working partner rather than abandoned asset. This transformation represented the most meaningful rehabilitation possible for a service dog of his caliber. Restoration not just of physical health, but of purpose that aligned with his profound capabilities and training. Whatever evidence they discovered tomorrow, this reclamation of partnership and mission had already begun healing wounds deeper than physical neglect. With operational preparations complete and necessary rest period beginning, Sophia allowed herself brief acknowledgement of emotion typically contained during tactical planning. Fierce pride in Atlas's resilience, determination that his suffering would serve greater purpose, commitment to ensuring that those responsible for his abandonment faced appropriate consequences for both personal and environmental betrayal. These emotions didn't compromise operational focus, but rather reinforced it, providing deeper motivation that would sustain them through whatever challenges awaited on the eastern slope. Together, they represented not just an investigation team, but living testimony to partnership that had survived deliberate severance. Partnership now focused with singular purpose on uncovering truth that someone had gone to elaborate lengths to conceal. In finding each other against impossible odds, they had discovered not just reunion, but renewed mission, purpose that aligned their exceptional capabilities with justice larger than themselves. Whatever awaited them tomorrow, they would face it not as victims seeking redress, but as investigators pursuing truth, their shared determination a force more powerful than the considerable obstacles arrayed against them. Dawn broke over the eastern ridge of Blackridge National Forest in a symphony of amber and gold, illuminating the rugged landscape with the first tendrils of morning light. Sophia and Atlas had been in position since before sunrise, concealed in a natural depression overlooking the designated rendezvous point where Marcus would soon arrive with his Forest Service patrol vehicle. The air carried the sharp scent of pine, mingled with the earthy richness of forest soil after recent rain, familiar elements of the environment where their partnership had first been forged years earlier. Atlas lay beside Sophia in perfect stillness, his tactical concealment posture unchanged, despite the hour they had maintained their observation position. The specialized support vest she had fitted him with the previous evening provided both protection for his recovering frame and subtle camouflage appropriate for forest operations. Though still far from his peak physical condition, his focused vigilance demonstrated operational readiness that transcended physical limitations, the mental discipline that had always distinguished him as an exceptional working partner. Surveillance of the rendezvous area had confirmed absence of monitoring equipment or personnel, validating Marcus's intelligence regarding concentration of Kane's security resources around the university research team at Cedar Creek. This operational window provided their best opportunity to investigate higher elevations, where Atlas had likely tracked contamination sources during his unauthorized deployments with Kane's team. Movement along the forest access road drew their attention, a standard Forest Service patrol vehicle approaching at regulation speed, its progress neither hurried nor hesitant. Sophia observed through field binoculars, confirming both vehicle identification and Marcus's lone presence before signaling Atlas to maintain position while she established initial contact. Using pre-arranged approach protocol, she advanced to the rendezvous point only after Marcus had completed standard patrol. Documentation procedures, activities that would appear routine in any monitoring logs or surveillance reports. When she emerged from concealment, his acknowledgement was professionally restrained, maintaining the appearance of unplanned encounter rather than coordinated operation. "Ranger Torres," she greeted with formal correctness as Atlas joined her, with similar disciplined reserve. "Environmental consultation as discussed." Marcus nodded, understanding the deliberate vagueness of her reference. "Equipment's prepared for field testing," he responded, opening the rear compartment of his vehicle to reveal specialized monitoring gear secured alongside standard patrol equipment. "Eastern Slope Survey is scheduled for today's patrol. Your assistance would be appropriate given your expertise." The exchange provided plausible explanation for their joint presence if communications were monitored, while the equipment, legitimate environmental testing gear used for standard Forest Service operations, established official cover for their actual investigation. Marcus had included additional specialized items Sophia had requested, including high-resolution documentation equipment and sample collection materials suitable for potential evidentiary purposes. They transferred necessary gear to field packs, while Marcus provided updated intelligence in measured tones that would not trigger concern if overheard through long-range surveillance. University team deployed 4 monitoring stations along Cedar Creek this morning. Primary attention remains focused on their activities. Station personnel maintain standard patrol patterns with no observed anomalies. This confirmation of operational conditions allowed them to proceed with their planned approach to the eastern slope, an area identified on the university's testing grid but not scheduled for examination until later in their research program. According to their analysis of Marcus's data and Atlas's tracking behavior during their initial reconnaissance, this location potentially contained critical evidence of whatever Kane's team had concealed following Operation Watershed. As they began their ascent toward the target coordinates, Sophia maintained careful monitoring of Atlas's condition, establishing regular rest intervals appropriate for his continuing rehabilitation. Though his determination never wavered, she could detect subtle indications of his physical limitations: slightly reduced stride length, more deliberate navigation of challenging terrain, carefully conserved energy expenditure that contrasted with his previous tireless operational capacity. Yet these adaptations demonstrated not weakness but extraordinary resilience, intelligent accommodation of current capabilities while maintaining mission focus. Atlas adjusted his working pattern to match physical constraints without compromising effectiveness. a testament to both his exceptional training and inherent intelligence that had made him renowned within the service before his unauthorized deployment and subsequent abandonment. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they ascended, transitioning from established forest trails to more rugged landscape characterized by rock formations and steeper inclines. Vegetation patterns shifted with elevation, providing natural indicators of water sources and drainage patterns that would influence contaminant migration from potential sources higher on the slope. 2 hours into their ascent, they reached a significant transition point, a natural plateau where the primary tributary they had previously identified branched into multiple smaller water sources emerging from the mountainside. Here, standard tracking protocols would typically require systematic examination of each potential pathway, a time-intensive process that might exceed their operational window before Kane's security teams rotated positions. Sophia knelt beside Atlas, removing specialized equipment from her pack, while Marcus established perimeter security with practiced efficiency. "This is where we need your specific skills," she told Atlas, her voice carrying the focused calm that had always characterized their operational communications. "Find the source you tracked before." She presented a sealed container holding water samples collected during their previous reconnaissance, samples containing the distinctive chemical signatures Atlas had already demonstrated ability to detect. This tracking methodology had been developed during their partnership years, allowing Atlas to identify specific contaminants and follow their concentration gradients to source points with remarkable precision. Atlas investigated the sample with professional focus, his olfactory assessment methodical and comprehensive. After approximately 30 seconds, he lifted his head and oriented toward the northeastern branch of the tributary system, not the largest water flow, but one that originated from an area closer to the boundary between Forest Service land and Northridge Mining's operations. "Confirmed," Sophia noted quietly, documenting the indication for their investigative record. With formal command signals, she directed Atlas to begin tracking along the identified water source, following at measured pace, while Marcus maintained wider situational awareness of their surroundings. The tributary narrowed as they ascended, becoming little more than a seep in certain sections before re-emerging with greater flow in others, a pattern suggesting underground portions of its course through the mountain's complex hydrogeology. Atlas maintained unwavering focus despite these interruptions, demonstrating the exceptional scent discrimination that had distinguished him during his service career. After approximately 40 minutes of careful tracking, they approached a significant geological feature, a rock face approximately 30 feet high where water emerged from a narrow fissure before cascading down into a small collection pool. Atlas's behavior shifted markedly as they neared this formation, his tracking pattern becoming more concentrated, focus intensifying with proximity to the water source. At the pool's edge, he provided clear alert indication, the distinctive posture that signaled significant findings during environmental monitoring operations. Sophia acknowledged his alert with quiet affirmation, preserving the water-air interface for proper sample collection, while Marcus documented the location with GPS coordinates and photographic evidence. Using specialized collection equipment, Sophia obtained multiple water samples from precise positions within the pool, following forensic protocols that would maintain evidentiary integrity if findings required legal proceedings. Marcus simultaneously collected soil samples from the surrounding area, focusing particularly on sedimentation patterns where water overflow had created natural filtration zones. Atlas maintained vigilant attention throughout these procedures, his posture suggesting awareness of the location's significance beyond current sample collection. After completing standard environmental documentation, Sophia recognized his continued alertness as indication that additional investigation was warranted. "He's still tracking something," she observed quietly. "There's more here than water contamination." Following Atlas's focused attention, they examined the rock face more carefully, noting unusual discoloration in certain sections that didn't match natural weathering patterns. Marcus retrieved specialized equipment from his pack, portable UV, illumination designed for detecting substances not visible under normal light conditions. Under UV illumination, the results were immediate and significant. Extensive residue patterns appeared on the rock face surrounding the water seep, residue consistent with chemical compounds used in mining operations but not naturally occurring in the forest ecosystem. More concerning, these residue patterns showed clear evidence of attempted removal, with scrubbed sections and application of neutralizing agents visible under specialized lighting. "Someone tried to eliminate evidence of contamination," Marcus noted grimly, documenting the findings with methodical precision. "These neutralizing compounds aren't natural. They're industrial cleaning agents specifically designed to break down mining chemicals." The implications were profound. This wasn't merely contamination reaching forest land through natural hydrogeological processes. This represented deliberate attempt to conceal evidence of such contamination after its discovery. The calculated nature of this concealment elevated potential violations from regulatory infractions to criminal environmental tampering. Sophia directed Atlas to continue his assessment, recognizing his continued alertness indicated findings beyond the immediate water source. With careful handler guidance, he investigated the broader area surrounding the rock face, eventually focusing attention on a section of disturbed earth approximately 10 feet from the water pool. Following his indication, they carefully examined the area, revealing recently disturbed soil that had been deliberately disguised with transplanted ground cover. Marcus retrieved specialized soil sampling equipment, systematically documenting the area before carefully removing the surface camouflage to reveal what lay beneath. The discovery confirmed their most serious suspicions. Buried approximately 18 inches below the disguised surface lay specialized monitoring equipment. Not standard Forest Service issue, but sophisticated sensing technology designed for continuous data collection. The equipment had been deliberately disabled, with power sources removed and data storage components extracted, leaving only the basic framework and sensing elements buried rather than removed entirely. "This is environmental monitoring equipment," Sophia confirmed, her professional experience with similar technology allowing immediate identification. High-sensitivity chemical detection systems designed for continuous operation in remote locations. This would have provided ongoing documentation of contamination levels and migration patterns. What made the discovery particularly significant was the equipment's condition. It hadn't been abandoned due to malfunction or obsolescence. It had been deliberately disabled and concealed after installation, with specific components removed to prevent data retrieval while eliminating evidence of its deployment. "Serial numbers are intact," Marcus noted, documenting the identification markers clearly visible on the equipment frame. "These will connect directly to Forest Service requisitions, equipment that should be accounted for in official inventory systems." This physical evidence provided crucial links in their developing understanding. Atlas had likely been deployed to this location during Operation Watershed to confirm contamination presence and guide placement of monitoring equipment. When that equipment documented evidence potentially damaging to Northridge Mining's expansion plans, Kane's team had returned to disable the systems, conceal their placement, and attempt to neutralize visible contamination evidence. Most significantly, the buried equipment established direct connection between Forest Service resources and potential environmental crimes, physical proof of operation outside proper protocols, followed by deliberate concealment rather than appropriate regulatory reporting. This evidence moved their investigation beyond circumstantial concerns to documentable violations with clear chain of custody. As they meticulously documented the site, Atlas maintained tactical security positioning, his alertness to their surroundings undiminished despite the lengthy operation. His continued operational focus reflected not just training, but profound understanding of their mission's importance. Awareness that their discoveries represented validation of his previous deployments and explanation for his subsequent abandonment. The comprehensive documentation complete, they carefully restored the site to its original appearance, ensuring their investigation would not be immediately apparent to Kane's security teams. Physical evidence samples were secured according to forensic protocols, creating verified collection documentation that would withstand potential legal challenges. This evidence provided the leverage they had sought for approaching Dr. Harrington. Concrete proof of environmental monitoring operation followed by deliberate concealment of findings. If the scientist had been involved in technical aspects of Operation Watershed without awareness of subsequent evidence suppression, this discovery might motivate cooperation based on professional ethics and regulatory responsibilities. Their descent followed alternative routing to minimize potential detection, Marcus maintaining communication silence, except for standard patrol check-ins that would appear routine in monitoring logs. The operational security measures reflected increasing stakes following their discoveries, evidence that implicated not just administrative misconduct, but potential criminal conspiracy involving federal land management and environmental protection regulations. As they approached the rendezvous point, where their paths would again separate, Sophia conducted final equipment transfer, while Marcus provided updated intelligence on broader operational conditions. University team completed initial monitoring. Station installation without incident. Security patterns remained concentrated around Cedar Creek. No unusual communications detected during standard monitoring. The absence of security alerts or pattern changes suggested their investigation remained undetected, critical operational advantage as they moved toward the next phase involving potential contact with Dr. Harrington. They established secure communication protocols for subsequent coordination, maintaining operational compartmentalization appropriate for increased sensitivity of their documented findings, with professional restraint appropriate for potential surveillance. Marcus acknowledged Atlas with the formal respect due an exceptional service animal rather than casual interaction. Exemplary field performance under challenging conditions, he noted simply, recognition that required no elaboration. Between professionals who understood the exceptional nature of the K9's capabilities, despite his ongoing rehabilitation. As Marcus departed in his patrol vehicle, maintaining standard protocols that would document routine environmental monitoring rather than significant investigation, Sophia and Atlas returned to concealed withdrawal route that would return them to secured transportation at their pre-established rally point. The physical evidence they carried represented substantial progress in their investigation, concrete documentation connecting Forest Service operations to potential environmental violations and subsequent concealment. Their return journey required careful navigation through increasingly complex operational environment. The university research team's presence at Cedar Creek had established legitimate environmental monitoring activity that Kane's security couldn't directly obstruct without raising regulatory concerns. However, this same activity had heightened overall surveillance and security measures throughout the region, requiring additional precautions during movement between investigation sites. Atlas maintained operational awareness throughout their withdrawal, his alertness to potential security encounters undiminished despite the physical demands of their extended field operation. When they paused at predetermined rest intervals, his recovery demonstrated improving stamina, evidence that proper nutrition and care were gradually restoring physical capabilities that matched his unwavering mental discipline. Reaching their secured transportation without detection represented successful completion of the day's primary objective: acquisition of physical evidence documenting environmental violations and subsequent concealment efforts. This evidence provided foundation for approaching Dr. Harrington with concrete proof rather than speculative concerns, potentially converting a member of Kane's operation into valuable intelligence source. The journey back to their secure accommodation allowed Sophia time to analyze the day's findings within broader context of their investigation. The documented evidence confirmed several key elements of their developing understanding. Atlas had been used to track contamination from mining, operations reaching Forest Service land. Monitoring equipment had been installed to document this contamination. When that documentation potentially threatened Northridge Mining's expansion plans, evidence had been deliberately concealed rather than properly reported through regulatory channels. What remained unclear was Dr. Harrington's specific role in these operations. As environmental scientist assigned to Kane's team, she possessed technical expertise necessary for both contamination assessment and monitoring equipment deployment. Whether she had participated in subsequent concealment efforts or remained unaware of evidence suppression would determine potential approach strategies for converting her from operation participant to investigation ally. By early evening, they had returned to their extended stay hotel in Riverview, implementing counter-surveillance protocols during approach to ensure their operational security remained intact. Once secured in their room, Sophia established clean documentation environment for processing the collected evidence, creating redundant storage methods that would preserve findings against potential compromise attempts. Atlas maintained security, positioning throughout these procedures his alertness undiminished despite the day's physical demands. Only after comprehensive documentation was complete did he finally transition to recovery posture, accepting nutritional supplements and therapeutic massage designed to address muscle fatigue resulting from their extended field operation. As Sophia reviewed the secured evidence and updated their investigation documentation, she maintained awareness of Atlas's condition with the experienced assessment of a veteran handler. The day's operation had demanded physical exertion beyond current veterinary recommendations for his rehabilitation timeline. Yet his performance had remained exceptional throughout, adapting to limitations without compromising effectiveness. This resilience reflected more than physical recovery. It demonstrated the profound psychological restoration occurring through resumption of purposeful partnership. Atlas had transformed from abandoned asset to active investigator, reclaiming professional identity that transcended the betrayal and neglect he had endured. This restoration of purpose represented healing more fundamental than physical rehabilitation alone could provide. The evidence they had collected provided crucial momentum for their investigation, establishing documented connection between Forest Service operations and potential environmental crimes. Yet it also elevated risks as they moved toward direct engagement with participants in those operations. Kane's team had demonstrated willingness to operate outside legal boundaries, abandoning a valuable service animal when he became inconvenient to their purposes. Their response to direct investigation threat could potentially involve more significant countermeasures. This risk reality necessitated careful strategic planning for their next operational phase. Approach to Dr. Harrington required precisely calibrated leverage, sufficient evidence to motivate cooperation without creating perception of threat that might trigger defensive reporting to Kane's security team. Timing and location would be equally critical, establishing contact under conditions where surveillance was minimized and immediate response capabilities limited. As evening deepened and necessary recovery period began, Sophia conducted preliminary analysis of water and soil samples using portable testing equipment Marcus had provided. The results confirmed presence of multiple compounds associated with mining operations, including heavy metals and processing chemicals not naturally occurring in forest ecosystems. Most significantly, specific chemical signatures matched exactly those Atlas had been trained to detect during their partnership years. Compounds he had demonstrated ability to identify at concentrations below standard detection equipment thresholds. This validation of his specialized capabilities provided final confirmation of their operational theory. Atlas hadn't been randomly selected for Operation Watershed, but specifically chosen for unique olfactory discrimination that made him exceptionally valuable for environmental monitoring operations. His abilities had allowed detection of contamination evidence that standard equipment might have missed or recorded at lower concentration levels, evidence subsequently concealed when it threatened Northridge Mining's expansion plans. The comprehensive nature of this concealment disabled monitoring equipment, neutralizing agents applied to visible contamination, falsified or suppressed reports, suggested organized conspiracy rather than isolated misconduct. This scope elevated potential consequences beyond administrative penalties to criminal liability involving multiple federal statutes regarding environmental protection, public land management, and false reporting to regulatory agencies. These higher stakes made Dr. Harrington's potential cooperation increasingly valuable. As scientist directly involved in technical aspects of the operation, she would possess knowledge beyond what physical evidence alone could establish. Understanding of data collected before equipment disabling, awareness of reported versus actual findings, potentially documentation maintained for scientific purposes separate from official operational records. Securing cooperation from operation participant represented significant investigative advancement beyond physical evidence collection. Yet approach strategy required careful consideration of motivational psychology. Understanding what core values might transcend institutional loyalty or concern about professional consequences of acknowledged involvement in potentially illegal operations. As Sophia developed this approach strategy, Atlas maintained positioned vigilance despite increasing fatigue evident in his posture. His continued operational focus, despite physical limitations, demonstrated commitment to their shared mission that transcended handler commands or training protocols. Partnership bond re-established through mutual purpose and shared determination to uncover truth behind his abandonment. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.